What is going on? It's not what it looks like.
Oh, it's exactly what it looks like.
They say betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from the people who claim to love you the most. Imagine inheriting the home that holds every memory of your childhood, restoring it with your own hands, dreaming of a wedding under the roses your grandmother planted, only to have that sanctuary threatened by the very sister you once protected. In the place where you believed you were safest, the seeds of treachery were already being sown. What would you do if your bloodline turned against you in your own house? Would you sacrifice? Would you fight? Or would you surrender the very ground beneath your feet? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story pulls you in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support is what keeps these voices alive. I remember the evening light that painted the old two-story home in gold, the same house my grandparents built stone by stone. The porch creaked under our steps as Derek and I walked hand in hand, my voice soft as I traced memories into the wood and walls. Here's where Grandma kept her sewing machine. Over there, I broke my arm climbing that tree, I said with a laugh. Derek smiled, running his fingers over the banister, whispering, "This house has a soul. I can feel it." In that moment, I believed him. We talked about tearing down the wall in the kitchen, about a bar where we could gather friends, about lining the hallway with family photos. Out in the garden, beneath the roses, Derek slipped behind me, his arms warm around my waist. "We'll marry here," he breathed, forehead pressed against mine. I closed my eyes, believing in forever. Then my phone rang. Alexis's voice cracked through the line, trembling, desperate. "Can I stay with you, just for a little while? I have nowhere else to go." Derek nodded at me to say yes. I hesitated, feeling something twist inside my chest, then finally answered, "All right, but only if we set some rules." I hung up, unaware that what I thought was an act of kindness would soon unravel every promise Derek had just made. The morning she arrived, I watched her silhouette through the window before the knock even came. Alexis stood on the porch with 2 oversized suitcases, her makeup carefully done, though her voice on the phone last night had cracked with desperation. I opened the door, and before I could even greet her, she threw her arms around me, pressing her face into my shoulder. "You're saving me," she whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. Her bags thudded onto the wooden floor as Derek appeared behind me, sipping coffee, eyes flicking between us with a polite smile. I led her inside, guided her to the couch, handed her a tissue. My tone was calm, deliberate, the kind that carries weight even when said softly. 2 months, I told her. That's all I can offer. During that time, you'll find a job, help with the housework, and respect the boundaries between me and Derek. This is our home, Alexis. You're welcome here, but you must understand the rules." She nodded quickly, dabbing her eyes, repeating, "I promise. I'll stay out of your way." She said all the right words, her voice steady now, but her gaze darted toward Derek. He chuckled, setting his mug down on the counter. "Come on, do we really need ground rules? She's your sister. Let her breathe a little." I felt my stomach tighten, but I stood firm, looking Alexis in the eye. It's not about breathing. It's about respect. She nodded again, though something flickered behind her smile. I walked her upstairs, pointing out the guest room. "This is yours," I said, opening the door. "Everything you need is here. Please keep the rest of the house clear." She ran her fingers across the dresser as though testing the space, then stepped into the hallway and paused in front of the master bedroom door. She lingered just long enough for me to notice, her lips curling into the faintest grin. "Beautiful room," she murmured. I shut the door before she could peek inside. Back downstairs, I taped the household schedule to the fridge, shared chores, grocery contributions, responsibilities. Alexis skimmed it, nodded once more, signing her name at the bottom like a child promising obedience. Derek laughed lightly at the formality, but I didn't care. I needed her to know where the line was. And as she unpacked her belongings, spreading dresses across the bed, I caught myself watching her from the doorway. She looked comfortable already, too comfortable. A chill passed through me that I couldn't explain. I told myself it was just nerves, just the weight of letting someone into a space that held all of my dreams. I pushed the thought aside. After all, she had promised, and I wanted so badly to believe her. It didn't take long before the edges of her promise began to fray. 2 weeks, maybe less, and the living room no longer looked like mine. Dresses draped over the arm of the sofa, her shoes lined up beneath the coffee table as if it were her closet. A half-open makeup bag sat on the mantel, spilling powders and brushes like it belonged there. I came home from work one evening, arms full of groceries, and had to push aside her handbags just to set them down. "Alexis," I said, my voice sharper than I intended, "this isn't your room. This is where we sit, where we eat. Put your things away." She blinked at me, wide-eyed, as though I had struck her. "You think I'm messy? You think I don't appreciate this roof over my head?" Tears welled instantly, too quickly. She collapsed onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. Before I could respond, she had her phone out, dialing on speaker. "Mom, Dad," she sniffled, "she's treating me like I'm a burden, like I don't belong." Their voices filled the room, distorted through the speaker but heavy with judgment. "Vanessa," my mother scolded, "you can't be so harsh. She's your sister. Family comes first." I stood frozen, groceries still in my arms, while Alexis peeked at me through her fingers, eyes glinting with something far from sorrow. Derek walked in from the kitchen, drying his hands on a towel, and sighed. "It's just a couple of bags, babe. Don't blow it out of proportion." I wanted to scream, to demand they see what I saw, that she was manipulating all of us. Instead, I set the groceries down, breathing through my nose until my pulse slowed. I reached into the drawer, pulled out the printed schedule I'd made, and held it between us. "From now on," I said firmly, "we stick to this. Laundry on Tuesdays, kitchen duty rotated. Clear spaces kept clear. Sign it, Alexis. I need your word in writing." Her face shifted in an instant, tears drying, replaced with a pout. She scrawled her name across the paper, the pen dragging carelessly, and shoved it back at me. "Happy?" she muttered. I posted it on the fridge under a magnet shaped like a sunflower my grandmother once loved. For a moment, I let myself believe it might work. That night, though, the sink overflowed with dishes she'd promised to wash. Her shoes were still under the coffee table, her sweaters over the sofa. When I reminded her, she shrugged, saying, "I was tired from looking for jobs all day." The next morning, I checked the classifieds on the counter. Not a single page had been touched. I stared at the mess, the lies, the smirk that crept across her face whenever Derek laughed at one of her jokes, and something inside me sank. I had set boundaries. She had signed them. But already she was erasing the lines with every step she took. One night, I came home late from work, rain still clinging to my coat, and I noticed the lights glowing faintly from the living room. The air smelled of red wine, rich and heavy, and as I stepped inside, the sound of laughter floated toward me. There they were, Derek and Alexis, sitting too close on the sofa, a half-empty bottle of silver oak between them. It was the bottle Derek had once saved for our anniversary, tucked away like a treasure. Now, 2 glasses sat on the coffee table, one rim smudged with Alexis's lipstick. I froze in the doorway, the rainwater dripping from my sleeves onto the wooden floor. Derek looked up, startled, his smile vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. "Hey," he said, jumping to his feet, "we just opened a bottle, thought we'd try something nice." Alexis swirled her glass slowly, her eyes lingering on me before she raised it with a coy smile. "Would you like a sip, Vanessa? It's really exquisite." The words cut deeper than they should have. I wanted to shout, to demand an explanation, but Derek placed a hand on my shoulder before I could speak. "Don't start," he muttered. "You're reading too much into things." His tone was defensive, sharp, like I was the intruder. Alexis only leaned back into the sofa, crossing her legs, the smirk never leaving her lips. Later that night, when Derek fell asleep, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message lit up the screen before fading. "Last night was fun, Dink." My stomach nodded. I reached for it, but stopped myself, trembling. I didn't need to read the rest. The truth was there, staring at me in neon blue. The next morning, Alexis strolled into the kitchen in a silk camisole, hair tousled like she had just rolled out of someone else's bed. She opened the fridge, humming a tune, and looked over her shoulder when she saw me. "Oh," she said, pretending to be startled, "I didn't expect you up this early." She pulled the robe tighter around her shoulders, as if remembering modesty only after being caught. I clenched the coffee mug in my hands, trying to keep my voice even. "Put some clothes on, Alexis. This isn't your apartment." She gave me a look of mock innocence, then turned to Derek as he walked in, placing her hand lightly on his arm. "Sorry, I'll be more careful," she sweetly. He laughed it off, brushing past me as if nothing were wrong. That day, I suggested we go out, just Derek and me, to reclaim something of what we had lost. He shook his head, claiming work would keep him late, and left with barely a kiss on my cheek. Hours later, as I passed Alexis's door, I heard the faint ping of a message notification and her laugh, low and private. I felt it then, deep in my chest. The ground beneath me was no longer solid. My house, my fiancé, my blood, everything was shifting, and I was standing alone at the fault line. The following weekend, my parents came over for dinner, and Alexis seized the moment like a stage she'd been waiting for. She tied a floral apron around her waist, humming cheerfully as she bustled around my kitchen, chopping vegetables and seasoning meat like she was the hostess of the house. Derek hovered beside her, offering to stir sauces, laughing at her jokes as though the two of them had been running this home together all along. I set the table in silence, every plate clinking sharper than it should have. When dinner began, my mother lifted her fork and sighed with delight. "Alexis, this is wonderful. You've always had such a gift." My father chimed in, nodding. "So thoughtful of her to take care of the meal. It feels like old times." Derek raised his glass toward Alexis. "Honestly, she cooks better than me," he joked. "Maybe even better than Vanessa." Their laughter filled the dining room, and my own name felt like a punch. I forced a smile, chewing food that suddenly tasted like ash. I watched Alexis perform, her laughter perfectly timed, her compliments scattered like confetti. She dabbed Derek's sleeve when he spilled a drop of wine, her hand lingering too long. My parents saw only a devoted younger daughter, not the shadow lurking behind her gestures. Each smile of theirs toward her deepened the hollow ache in my chest. After dinner, I excused myself, saying I'd fetch a sweater for my mother from upstairs. I climbed the steps slowly, trying to breathe through the tightness in my throat. But when I pushed open the master bedroom door, I stopped cold. Alexis was inside. She stood by my dresser, holding the velvet box that held my engagement ring. The lid was open, the diamond catching the light between her fingers. "What are you doing in here?" My voice cracked louder than I intended. She turned, lips curling into a half smile. "Relax," she said lightly. "I was just curious." She closed the box with a snap, too casual, and set it back on the dresser. I stepped forward, my pulse pounding. "This is my room, Alexis. You don't get to be in here, ever." Derek appeared in the doorway, drawn by the sound. He glanced between us, frowning at me. "What's going on?" I pointed at Alexis, still standing too close to my things. She was in here, going through my jewelry. Alexis shrugged, folding her arms. "I just wanted to see. No harm done." And Derek, he looked at me and said, "Don't make such a big deal out of it." His words sliced me open more than Alexis's trespass ever could. Later, when the guests had gone and the house had quieted, I sat at my desk, staring at the glow of my laptop. I typed her name into the search bar, half on instinct. The screen filled with suggestions, the words she must have typed in herself. Will he leave fiancé for me? How to take over the master bedroom? My hands shook as I closed the lid. She wasn't just intruding, she was planning, and no one but me seemed willing to see it. The next family dinner felt different the moment I sat down. The air was tense, but no one wanted to name it. My mother chatted nervously about the weather, my father poured wine, Derek stared at his plate. Alexis, however, was glowing. She wore a fitted dress, her hand brushing over her stomach every so often, as though rehearsing a secret. I felt it before it happened, like a storm rolling in on a clear horizon. Halfway through the meal, she tapped her glass with a spoon, the sharp ting silencing every conversation. All eyes turned to her. She rose slightly from her chair, smile trembling with excitement. "I have news," she announced, her voice soft but steady. My father leaned forward. My mother clasped her hands. Alexis drew in a breath. "I'm pregnant." My parents gasped. Forks clattered against plates. My mother's eyes filled with tears as she rushed around the table to embrace her. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, "this is such a blessing." My father patted her back, stunned but smiling. I sat frozen, my body numb. But Alexis wasn't finished. She turned, her gaze locking onto mine like a blade sliding between ribs. "And Derek," she said deliberately, "is the father." The room collapsed into silence. Derek's face drained of color. He tried to speak, but only stumbled over his words. It was one mistake," he stammered, eyes darting to me. "I was drunk. It didn't mean anything." My mother pulled back, eyes wide. My father's jaw clenched. I could feel everyone waiting for me to scream, to cry, to break, but I didn't. I set my fork down carefully, the scrape of metal against porcelain loud in the silence. "When?" My voice was calm, too calm. Alexis smirked, almost triumphant. "That night we opened the silver oak," she said. My chest burned, but I only nodded. "I see." I rose from the table, collected the empty dishes with steady hands, and carried them into the kitchen. Behind me, the voices swirled. My mother trying to soothe, Derek trying to explain, Alexis basking in the chaos she had created. I stacked the plates, turned on the faucet, and let the water drown their noise. My hands shook, but I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing her shatter. Later, in the quiet of my room, I unlocked the small safe under my bed. Inside were the deed to the house, the mortgage papers, the proof of ownership. I laid them out across my desk, each page a reminder of the one thing she couldn't steal from me. Then I opened my laptop and typed an email to my lawyer. What legal steps are necessary to remove unwanted occupants from a property? I closed the lid and sat back, my pulse still hammering but my mind steady. They thought they had cornered me. They thought I had no choice. But they had forgotten one simple truth. This was my house, and in my house, I would decide who stayed and who left. The morning after that dinner, the house felt colder than usual. I stood at the counter pouring coffee when Alexis came gliding into the kitchen, one hand resting dramatically on her stomach. She smiled sweetly, too sweetly, and said, "I've been thinking, Derek and I should really move into the master bedroom. It's bigger, closer to the bathroom, and with the baby coming, I need comfort." She said it as though it were already decided, as though the room I had slept in since childhood no longer belonged to me. Derek appeared behind her, running a hand through his hair, avoiding my eyes. "It might make sense," he mumbled. "You know, for the baby's sake." His words landed like stones in my chest. I set my cup down, slow and deliberate. "That room," I said, "is mine. This house is mine." Alexis only tilted her head, the corners of her lips curling upward. She reached out, fingers grazing the diamond on my hand. "Do you really think you'll be needing this anymore?" she asked, her tone mocking. My stomach turned, but I stayed silent. Before I could respond, her phone lit up on the counter. She swiped quickly, put it on speaker. My mother's voice filled the room. Vanessa, darling, you have to put the baby first. Let them have the space. You can make sacrifices, can't you? Alexis leaned back smugly, letting my parents fight her battle. Derek nodded along like he'd already surrendered. I stared at both of them, the man I had planned to marry and the sister I once protected, and I realized they thought I was cornered, that I would fold, like I always did, under the weight of family guilt. I placed my cup on the counter with a sharp clink, my eyes steady. You want my room? I asked softly. Or is it that you want me gone from this house altogether? Alexis shrugged, unfazed. If it's too uncomfortable for you, maybe you should find another place for a while, just until the baby comes. The audacity of it nearly stole my breath. She had walked into my home with nothing but suitcases and excuses, and now she dared to suggest I be the one to leave. I swallowed the rage clawing at my throat. Without another word, I turned on my heel and walked down the hall, into my bedroom, and straight to the safe. The papers waited for me there. The deed, the mortgage statements, the signatures that bore only my name. As I gathered them into a folder, a calmness spread through me. They had mistaken my silence for weakness, my restraint for surrender, but I was done playing their game. When I returned to the kitchen, folder in hand, Alexis's smirk faltered for the first time. Derek's shoulders stiffened. I laid the documents flat on the table, the crisp shuffle echoing in the quiet room. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. They would see soon enough exactly whose house this really was. I spread the folder open across the kitchen table, the papers fanning out like a hand of cards no one expected me to play. The deed, the mortgage, every page stamped with my name alone. Alexis leaned forward, her smirk twitching, eyes darting across the documents. Derek shifted uncomfortably, rubbing the back of his neck, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed. This house, I said, my voice, even, deliberate, belongs to me. I paid for it. I keep it standing. You don't get to tell me where I sleep. You don't get to tell me to leave. I paused, letting the silence press against them. Then I looked directly at Derek and said the words that had been burning on my tongue. Honey, I own this house. The sentence cracked through the air like thunder. Alexis flinched, but quickly recovered, clutching her stomach with theatrical flair. So that's it? She hissed. You'd throw out your pregnant sister? You'd punish me and an innocent child? Her voice rose, shrill, designed to cut, to make me the villain. Derek stepped closer, desperation creeping into his face. Vanessa, please, I made a mistake, a horrible mistake, but don't do this. Don't let anger destroy everything we've built. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away, slipping off the ring he had given me. I set it gently on the table, beside the papers. What we built was already destroyed, I said. I slid a crisp envelope across the table. Alexis hesitated before pulling it open. Her eyes flicked across the page and widened. 30 days? She whispered. You're giving us 30 days? I nodded. You'll both be out by then. That's legal notice. If you don't go, I'll change the locks. For the first time, Alexis's confidence faltered. She slammed the letter down, tears springing to her eyes. You can't do this to me, to us. You'll regret it, she cried. Derek tried to soothe her, but she shoved him away, spinning toward me. You're heartless, stone cold. I didn't flinch. I had expected every insult, every performance. What I hadn't expected was the wave of calm washing over me as I watched her unravel. I stood taller, gathering the folder into my arms. Heartless, I said softly, is betraying your own sister under her roof. Heartless is stealing what doesn't belong to you. Alexis's sobs filled the kitchen as Derek sat down heavily, burying his face in his hands. For a moment, the room felt like a stage at the end of a play, curtains falling, all illusions shattered. I turned and walked down the hallway, the weight of the documents pressed against my chest like armor. Behind me, their voices tangled in desperate whispers, plotting excuses, rehearsing pleas. But the decision was already written in ink. 30 days, no more. 2 weeks into their countdown, the house felt like a battlefield held under uneasy truce. Boxes had begun to stack in corners, half packed, half forgotten. Alexis moved through the halls like a ghost one minute, a tempest the next, slamming doors, crying loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. Derek avoided me almost entirely, skulking between the kitchen and the guest room, his silence heavier than any argument. One evening, while searching for an old photo album, I pulled open the bottom shelf of the bookcase and felt something wedged behind the row of novels. It was a journal, small and leather-bound, pages worn at the edges. I opened it without thinking, and the words bled into me like poison. Plan. Get Derek alone more often. Remind him I understand him better than she does. Move into master bedroom by spring. Once baby arrives, this house will be mine. My hands trembled as I flipped through page after page. Each entry was meticulous, like she had been plotting a hostile takeover of my life. There were notes about our parents, about how to use their guilt as leverage. Even references to Derek. He'll cave if I keep praising him. He likes feeling needed. My stomach turned. That night, I laid the journal on the kitchen table where they couldn't ignore it. When they came in, I didn't say a word. I only tapped the cover. Derek frowned, picked it up, and read the first page. His face drained of color. Alexis lunged forward, trying to snatch it back, but I held her wrist firm. "Read it," I told him. He flipped through the pages in silence, eyes darting faster, his lips tightening. "You planned this?" he finally whispered, looking at her. Alexis's voice rose, panicked. "It's not what it looks like. I was venting, just writing feelings. You know me, I exaggerate." Her words spilled out too fast, each excuse thinner than the last. I leaned across the table, my voice low and steady. "This wasn't an accident. You didn't just fall into his arms. You mapped it out like a blueprint, and you thought no one would ever see." Alexis's mask cracked. Tears streaked her cheeks, but her eyes burned with defiance. "You think throwing me out will fix anything? You think Derek will still choose you after all this?" she spat. Derek buried his face in his hands, shaking his head, muttering, "What have I done?" I pushed the eviction notice closer to them, the ink sharp under the kitchen light. Friday, that's the deadline. 30 days means 30 days. After that, the locks change. Alexis sobbed harder, pounding the table with her fists, while Derek sat motionless, hollowed out by shame. I gathered the journal back into my hands. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You tried to write me out of my own life, but I hold the pen here, and I've already written the ending." Day 30 arrived like the final toll of a clock tower bell. The sun hung low, casting long shadows across the porch as a moving van rumbled in the driveway. I stood by the window, arms crossed, watching Derek carry out the last of the boxes. His shoulders sagged beneath the weight, not just of cardboard, but of consequence. When he reached the door, he set the box down, fished the spare key from his pocket, and placed it on the counter without a word. His voice broke the silence, soft, almost pleading. "I'm sorry, Vanessa, for everything." I met his eyes, calm and steady, and said only, "I hope you learn from it." That was all there was left between us. Alexis came last. She shuffled through the hall, one hand clutching her stomach, the other dragging a suitcase behind her. Her eyes darted around the house, clinging to the walls as if she could brand them into memory. At the threshold, she stopped, turned to me with a glare that carried more venom than sorrow. "You'll regret this," she hissed, her voice low, bitter. I didn't answer. I simply closed the door when she stepped out, twisting the deadbolt until it clicked. The sound echoed like a seal, binding the house back to me. The silence that followed was heavy, but not empty. For the first time in months, it belonged to me. I moved through each room slowly, gathering stray strands of hair, forgotten receipts, a perfume bottle left behind on the bathroom sink. I bagged them up, carried them outside, and dropped them into the trash. Then I opened every window, let the spring air sweep through, carrying away the remnants of their chaos. I spent hours scrubbing floors, changing curtains, rearranging furniture. Each task felt less like cleaning and more like reclaiming. In the living room, I hung a new set of photos. My grandparents smiling in the garden, my own graduation picture, a framed letter from my first promotion. The house no longer bore their fingerprints. It was mine again, filled with the echoes I chose. That evening, I brewed tea and sat by the window, watching the last streaks of daylight fade across the yard. My laptop chimed with an email from work, a promotion, official and long-awaited. I smiled, a small but genuine smile, and let it sink in. Later, I dialed into my therapy session, recounting every detail of the last month. My therapist's words were gentle but firm. Boundaries are not cruelty, they're survival. I ended the night with a journal of my own, writing the truth in ink that no one could twist. This house is my sanctuary. I decide who enters and who stays, and I will never surrender that again. Day 30 arrived like the final toll of a clock tower bell. The sun hung low, casting long shadows across the porch as a moving van rumbled in the driveway. I stood by the window, arms crossed, watching Derek carry out the last of the boxes. His shoulders sagged beneath the weight, not just of cardboard, but of consequence. When he reached the door, he set the box down, fished the spare key from his pocket, and placed it on the counter without a word. His voice broke the silence, soft, almost pleading. "I'm sorry, Vanessa, for everything." I met his eyes, calm and steady, and said only, "I hope you learn from it." That was all there was left between us. Alexis came last. She shuffled through the hall, one hand clutching her stomach, the other dragging a suitcase behind her. Her eyes darted around the house, clinging to the walls as if she could brand them into memory. At the threshold, she stopped, turned to me with a glare that carried more venom than sorrow. "You'll regret this," she hissed, her voice low, bitter. I didn't answer. I simply closed the door when she stepped out, twisting the deadbolt until it clicked. The sound echoed like a seal, binding the house back to me. The silence that followed was heavy, but not empty. For the first time in months, it belonged to me. I moved through each room slowly, gathering stray strands of hair, forgotten receipts, a perfume bottle left behind on the bathroom sink. I bagged them up, carried them outside, and dropped them into the trash. Then I opened every window, let the spring air sweep through, carrying away the remnants of their chaos. I spent hours scrubbing floors, changing curtains, rearranging furniture. Each task felt less like cleaning and more like reclaiming. In the living room, I hung a new set of photos. My grandparents smiling in the garden, my own graduation picture, a framed letter from my first promotion. The house no longer bore their fingerprints. It was mine again, filled with the echoes I chose. That evening, I brewed tea and sat by the window, watching the last streaks of daylight fade across the yard. My laptop chimed with an email from work, a promotion, official and long-awaited. I smiled, a small but genuine smile, and let it sink in. Later, I dialed into my therapy session, recounting every detail of the last month. My therapist's words were gentle but firm. Boundaries are not cruelty, they're survival. I ended the night with a journal of my own, writing the truth in ink that no one could twist. This house is my sanctuary. I decide who enters and who stays, and I will never surrender that again.